Hi all. You read that correct. Ray Dalio did indeed say that Harshad Mehta was framed. And in order to find evidence for that, please listen to the video on his own channel, Principles of the Changing World Order by Ray Dalio. Let's start here.
In 1971, when I was a young clerk on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, the United States ran out of money and defaulted on its debts. That's right, the US ran out of money. How? Well, back then gold was the money used in transactions between countries. Paper money, like the dollar, was like checks in a checkbook in that it had no value other than it could be exchanged for gold, which was the real money. At the time, the United States was spending a lot more money than it was earning by writing a lot more of these paper money checks than it had gold in the bank to exchange for them. As people turned these checks into the bank for gold money, the amount of gold in the US started to dwindle. It soon became obvious that the US couldn't keep its promises for all the existing paper money, so people holding dollars rushed to exchange them before the gold ran out. Recognizing that the US was going to run out of real money, on Sunday evening, August 15th, President Nixon went on television to tell the world that the US was breaking its promise to let people exchange their dollars for gold. Of course, he didn't say it that way. He said it more diplomatically, without making it clear that the United States was defaulting.
The strength of a nation's currency is based on the strength of that nation's economy. And the American economy is by far the strongest in the world. Accordingly, I have directed the Secretary of the Treasury to take the action necessary to defend the dollar against the speculators. I directed Secretary Connolly to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States.
I watched in awe, realizing that money as we understood it was ending. What a crisis. I expected the stock market to plunge the next day, so I got on the exchange floor early to prepare. When the opening bell rang, pandemonium broke out, but not the kind I expected. The market was up, way up, and went on to rise nearly 25%. That surprised me, because I never experienced a currency devaluation before. When I dug into history, I discovered that the exact same thing happened in 1933 and had the exact same effect. Then paper dollars were also linked to gold, which the US was running out of because it was spending more paper money checks than it had gold to exchange for them. And President Roosevelt announced on the radio that he would break the country's promise to exchange dollars for gold.
It was then that I issued the proclamation, providing for the national bank holiday. And this was the first step in the government's reconstruction of our financial and economic fabric. The second step, last Thursday, was the legislation, promptly and patriotically passed by the Congress, confirming my proclamation and broadening my powers so that it became possible, in view of the requirement of time, to extend the holiday and lift the ban of that holiday gradually in the days.
There was a lot to unpack there, but the most important thing you need to take away from that clip is that the stock markets rise when the currencies are devalued. See, there are a few historically important things that happened in the 1990s, early 90s especially. On November 9th, 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. India was already undergoing a balance of payment crisis. And at the time, there was no such thing as a gold standard. But the US dollar was the reserve currency of the world. And somewhere in December 26, around December 26, 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed, leading to what we now know as the unipolar moment. The Soviet Union collapsing made the dollar hegemony a lot more solid in a political sense of the word. At the same time, the Indian government was facing a balance of payment crisis starting in July 1991. You can see the dollar to Indian rupee was around 17 rupees at the start of 1990. A little less than that. This is a very rapid decline in the value of the rupee with a, let's say, 70% decline in less than 3 years' time, in 2.5 to 3 years' time. So, what Harshad Mehta is blamed for is the 1990 to 1992 stock market bubble, this massive 642% rise in the Sensex, is blamed squarely on him. Even though the currency had depreciated against the US dollar by 70% in the same time. So there may have been funny money games that were being played by the stock market brokers. But Harshad Mehta personally could not be possibly held responsible for a stock market bubble being created. If that were the case, every broker on the planet would be guilty of creating a stock market bubble. The truth of the matter is that the Indian rupee had weakened significantly. So prices of goods, services, and everything would go up commensurately. Since the prices of goods and services would go up, businesses that are selling the goods and services would naturally make more profit, thereby increasing the valuations. In case you're wondering, this is the Sensex historical chart, and this is the Indian the dollar against the Indian rupee chart. There's another thing you need to be paying attention to. Even though Ray Dalio didn't say this explicitly, it's quite clear that it was politically convenient to paint a target on the largest stockbroker and asset manager in India at the time for a 60% decline in the market index within a few months. There you have it. Okay, this is the chart of the year-on-year rate of change of the dollar against the Indian rupee. As you can see, since 1991, there has never been a time in which the rupee has devalued so rapidly, ever. Not before, not since. This was it. At least not in recorded history. Perhaps if we go further back, there would be instances, but this is it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. You learned something from it. I will be bringing some educational content here on this channel for investment purposes later on. So please like and subscribe. This is the Grim Investor. Thank you for watching.